Tonight, I want to tell you a story about giving everything and still not being satisfied, about love, wealth, and the quiet darkness that can grow in the spaces between. In a small lakeside town, a family gave their son every luxury, every comfort, every gift imaginable. But sometimes, the heart wants more than the world can give. This is the story of Lucas Blakemore and the price of ungratefulness. There was a boy named Lucas, and in his small lakeside town of Willow Ridge, everyone knew the Blakemore family. They were not just well-off, they were the kind of family whose wealth seemed woven into the very air of their neighborhood. But wealth alone never tells a story. It's the weight of what you give, and what is never enough, that lingers. Lucas's parents, Martin and Evelyn, gave him everything he could imagine. On his 16th birthday, a sleek black car waited in the driveway, polished until it reflected the pale morning sun like a mirror. They told him it was for his freedom, the freedom to go anywhere, to be anyone, and he drove it with a quiet kind of pride, though it never seemed to fill the space inside him. By the time he graduated high school, he was surrounded by more luxury than most people saw in a lifetime. A townhouse on the lake, with a balcony that overlooked the still water, was his. Every detail of the house, from the soft, cream-colored rugs to the thick velvet curtains, had been chosen with him in mind. And when he came home from college one summer, flushed with accomplishment for completing what he called his final exam, his parents placed a watch on his wrist, gleaming and expensive, worth more than many families spent on a car. To anyone else, it might have seemed enough. And in some ways, it was more than enough. But for Lucas, there was a quiet emptiness beneath the surface. He accepted the gifts with the practiced smile of someone who always gets what he wants, but the smile never reached his eyes. It wasn't just that he wanted more. It was that he wanted the certainty of the future, the promise that one day the Blakemore fortune would be his without question, without hesitation, without resistance. The presents, the cars, the townhouse, they were small gestures compared to the larger prize he imagined waiting for him. Even the people around him noticed the difference. Lucas had a friend, someone who had grown up alongside him through school and quiet neighborhood streets. This friend often remarked on the odd distance in Lucas's gaze. "It's like he's always calculating, even when he's smiling," he would say. And perhaps that was true. Lucas smiled, nodded, accepted, but inside, he was never satisfied. Martin and Evelyn never saw this coming. They had built their lives on love and care, on making sure their children wanted for nothing. They measured success not just in wealth but in moments. The laughter echoing down the hallway, the joy of a shared meal, the quiet satisfaction of watching a child grow into their own skin. And yet all of this, every late night spent worrying about tuition, every sacrifice, every sleepless night working to give Lucas the world, felt like it was slipping away unacknowledged. One evening, Martin stood on the balcony of the lakeside house, the sky streaked with shades of pink and gray, and he watched Lucas pacing the manicured lawn below. There was something unsettling in the boy's stride, a restlessness that no luxury could soothe. Martin had learned over time that money could fix many things, but it could not fix the emptiness inside someone who refused to be grateful. And so the tension built quietly, almost imperceptibly. Friends and neighbors might have noticed the subtle signs. The small glare when a gift was deemed insufficient, the way Lucas never lingered over a thoughtful gesture, always scanning the horizon for the next opportunity. But in the Blakemore household, there was no one to warn them, no one who could step in. The family was alone in their wealth, and alone in the emotional distance of their eldest son. The gifts continued, almost ritualistically. Graduation came and went, each accomplishment met with another material token. Watches, cars, trips to far-off cities, and invitations to exclusive gatherings where Lucas would nod politely and offer that practiced smile. To anyone watching from the outside, it looked like the life of a fortunate young man. But inside, in the quiet corners of the house, the rooms where the air was still and heavy, the parents felt a creeping sense of unease. Something about their son's satisfaction was always just out of reach. It was a peculiar sort of love, the kind that demands nothing in return but hopes for everything. Evelyn often whispered to Martin in the kitchen late at night, when the house was empty save for the hum of the refrigerator and the distant rustle of trees outside. "Do you think he ever really appreciates any of it?" she asked. And Martin would shrug, brushing his hand across his forehead. "I hope he does," he said, though even he did not fully believe it, because the truth of it was simple and cruel. No gift, no luxury, no demonstration of devotion would ever satisfy the part of Lucas that longed for more. It wasn't just wealth he wanted, it was certainty, power, and control. And those things no parent could buy. By the time he was in college, the distance had grown into something almost tangible. Martin and Evelyn continued to provide, hoping the patterns of generosity would eventually reach him. And in quiet moments, Lucas would catch glimpses of their eyes, the hope, the love, and the subtle, almost invisible traces of worry, and he would look away. Not out of malice, perhaps, but because looking meant acknowledging something he had no intention of feeling, gratitude. And so the stage was set, quietly, invisibly, in the still rooms of the Blakemore house and along the reflective surface of the lake. It was a stage not built for drama or spectacle, but for subtle, creeping moral tension. The gifts were there, each one a monument to love, each one a reminder that sometimes, even the best intentions cannot reach the heart of someone determined to want more. The night settled over Willow Ridge like a soft velvet curtain. Lights flickered in the town below, mirrored in the glass of the lakeside house. Lucas walked the balcony, tracing the contours of the rail with his fingers. Below, the house was quiet, almost reverent. The air seemed to hum with the weight of the unspoken. Love offered, love ignored, the quiet ache of something missing that no gift could ever replace. And in that silence, the story waited. There are moments in life that arrive without fanfare, like a shadow stretching across a room you didn't notice before. For Lucas, one of those moments began not with a loud argument or a dramatic confrontation, but with the quiet, insistent whisper of dissatisfaction. It was a Thursday afternoon when the weight of his restlessness finally pressed into something tangible. The lake outside shimmered under a pale winter sun, its surface calm, unbroken, reflecting the town of Willow Ridge like a perfect mirror. Lucas walked the edge of the lake, hands in his pockets, and thought of the house behind him. His house, by all appearances, and yet in some corner of his mind, it felt like it belonged to everyone but him. He remembered the car he had received at 16, polished black with leather seats, and the townhouse on the lake that seemed almost too beautiful for him to occupy. He remembered the watch, heavy and precise, that Martin and Evelyn had given him after his last college exam. Every gift had been a testament, a proof, a reminder of their love, their investment, their hopes. And yet, they were never enough. Lucas didn't think of himself as cruel. Not exactly. He considered himself practical, determined, ambitious. Someone who understood what he wanted and was willing to ensure it came to pass. But ambition, when it crosses the line into something darker, is easy to mistake for necessity. He walked into his father's study one evening, where Martin sat at his desk, glasses perched on the tip of his nose, reviewing paperwork. The lamp cast a soft glow over the room, illuminating the neat stacks of papers and the faint traces of wood grain in the desk. Lucas leaned against the doorframe, folding his arms. "Dad," he said, his voice measured, almost casual. "I've been thinking." Martin looked up. "About what?" Lucas hesitated, just a fraction. A pause like that is rare in someone who always seems to have the next sentence ready. "About the future," he said finally. "About inheritance. About what comes next." Martin's eyes softened, though a shadow lingered. "Everything comes in its time," he said. "You're still young. There's plenty of life ahead." Lucas nodded, but his mind wasn't there. It was elsewhere, wandering corridors no one else could see. He imagined the wealth of the Blakemore family as a mountain, vast and unreachable unless he could claim it, control it entirely. And he wanted that mountain, not because he needed it, not because he wanted to spend it, but because it represented something deeper: power, finality, certainty. In the days that followed, Lucas moved through the house like a restless wind. He greeted his mother, Evelyn, with polite words, smiled at his younger brother, and walked past the Lakeview windows, imagining everything he might control if the world were rearranged in his favor. The house seemed to sense the change, its quiet elegance somehow heavier, its halls narrower. Martin and Evelyn noticed subtle differences. A glance that lingered too long, a silence that was too deliberate, a casual comment that hinted at something more, something Lucas would not yet reveal. They spoke in hushed tones at night, wondering if they had failed somewhere, if all their gifts had been for nothing. They had given him a world, and he had stepped back from it as though it were merely scenery. The idea came to him quietly at first, like a thought brushing the edges of his mind. Then it solidified, sharp and unyielding. He would not wait for the future. He would ensure it for himself now. It was a plan he kept close, unspoken, even to himself in its entirety. Only in the hush of his bedroom at night, when the house was still and the lake beyond the window mirrored the moonlight, did he let the thought linger in full form. Lucas began making preparations, carefully, methodically. He did not revel in the act itself. There was no anger, no thrill. There was only a quiet, cold calculation. It was as if he were arranging chess pieces, ensuring that every move led to the outcome he desired. Each day, he rehearsed his motions in his mind, imagining conversations that would never happen, imagining reactions that could not be predicted. Meanwhile, Martin and Evelyn carried on with their routines, unaware of the gathering storm. They bought groceries, tended to the house, laughed quietly over memories of Lucas as a child. There was a strange tension in the air, but it seemed only the weight of the season. They had no idea how close the shadow had come. The day arrived suddenly, without warning or sign. It was as if the house itself held its breath, waiting. Lucas moved through the rooms, polite, calm, measured, the way he always had, but now every step carried the silent weight of inevitability. The lake reflected the pale morning light, and even the birds outside seemed still. Martin stood in the hallway, reading a note Lucas had left. Evelyn busied herself in the kitchen, humming softly, unaware of how fragile the world had become. Lucas paused by the window, gazing at the water, imagining what it would mean to finally claim certainty, to hold power over a life that had always been out of reach emotionally. The house had been a place of giving. Every corner, every rug, every polished surface, every lamp and light switch had been an offering of love. And now, it seemed, Lucas was ready to rewrite the story entirely. Not out of hatred, not out of malice, but because for him, the gifts had never sufficed. The house, the lake, the town, the family, they were only stepping stones to a certainty he believed he deserved. And so the quiet tension stretched, taut and trembling, like a note held at the peak of a song. No one outside the walls could feel it. No one in town could have guessed. The air in the Blakemore house was thick with an unspoken understanding, the kind that only exists when desire and expectation collide, and the weight of human choices presses down quietly but inexorably. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the distant hills, Lucas looked across the table at Martin and Evelyn, who were laughing softly about a memory of his childhood. He smiled, polite, practiced, a mask honed over years of privilege and expectation. But beneath that smile was a stillness that no laughter could reach. A stillness that would echo far beyond the house, beyond the lake, beyond the warmth of home. It was in that stillness, in the quiet, measured space of a boy who had everything and wanted more, that the story bent toward its fateful turn. And it was in that silence that the listener begins to feel the unease. Not in the act itself, but in the cold, moral distance that had been quietly nurtured for years. The house was quieter now, not because anything had changed in its structure, its polished floors, or the shimmering lake outside, but because the invisible weight that had hung in its air had settled, heavy and still. Lucas was gone from the rooms he had wandered so often, the halls where he had paced and planned. The laughter and chatter that had once filled the kitchen were replaced by echoes, soft, lingering, as if the house itself remembered every small movement, every subtle glance, every gift given and ignored. Martin sat alone in the study, the familiar stacks of papers untouched. He had long since learned that love, when challenged by the ungratefulness of those closest to you, requires a different kind of endurance. He traced the edges of a photograph on his desk, one of Lucas as a small boy, sitting on the front steps of the lakeside house, sun on his face, eyes wide with curiosity. In that moment, he remembered hope. Evelyn joined him quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. There was no need for words. Words had failed already, long before any event that had made the world feel colder, more precise, more fragile. Together, they carried a weight that only parents can carry. The understanding that even when your child strays into darkness, your love does not vanish. It simply adapts. Outside the courthouse, in a city far from the serene streets of Willow Ridge, the slow machinery of justice had turned. Lucas faced the consequences of choices made in silence, in the unobserved corners of his mind. The trial, the conviction, the sentence, all of it was precise, measured, like a clockwork set in motion long before anyone could intervene. And yet, even in that rigid framework, there remained one last act of mercy, one quiet intervention that defied the cold arithmetic of law. Martin had petitioned, pleaded, every day for months, speaking to anyone who would listen, writing letters, making calls. The weight of his sorrow and hope pressed not only on the legal system, but on the hearts of those who could make a difference. It was not just a father saving a son. It was a father asserting that love, even for someone ungrateful, is a force beyond the finality of human judgment. When the decision finally came, Lucas learned that his sentence would be commuted to life in prison. He received the news with a calm that was almost chilling in its detachment. "I am thankful for this decision," he said, words floating in the sterile room. "Not for me, but for my dad." The statement carried an odd weight. Not warmth, not repentance, but acknowledgement, in a way only someone distant from emotion can manage. The gratitude was a gift to his father, not to himself. And in that subtle, unsettling acknowledgement, the story found its lingering echo. Back at the lakeside house, Martin and Evelyn walked through the rooms that had once been filled with expectation and tension. Each space now carried a memory, a whisper of what had been, and a quiet acceptance of what could never be. They did not speak of anger, nor of revenge. Those emotions had no home here. Instead, they carried a different knowledge. That love is sometimes measured not in reciprocity, but in endurance, in the ability to act for someone who may never fully appreciate you. The lake reflected the sky as always, pale and serene, indifferent to the human dramas unfolding on its banks. The sun rose and set, the seasons changed, and the house held its memories silently. Friends who once visited often now came less frequently, sensing the subtle tension, the invisible scar that lingered despite the absence of outward turmoil. Lucas's absence, though not mourned in the way one might expect, was felt in the quiet hum of the house, in the air that seemed heavier, in the spaces once filled by his restless energy. His parents continued their lives, not through denial, but through acceptance. They moved with a calm that comes only from years of understanding that love and loss are intertwined, that giving everything does not guarantee gratitude, and that mercy is sometimes the most difficult gift to offer. In the quiet of the evenings, when the lake mirrored the fading light of day, Martin would sometimes stand on the balcony, tracing the contours of the rail, thinking of Lucas. He did not ask for explanations, nor did he dwell on anger. Instead, he focused on the act itself, the choice to intercede, to plead, to extend mercy when it could have been withheld. That was the measure of his love, the proof that even in the face of disappointment, he remained unwavering. Evelyn would join him silently, hands clasped, sharing in a quiet understanding that transcended words. They did not speak of the past, nor of the future. They merely existed in the space between memory and hope, knowing that some lessons are taught not through gratitude, but through the simple act of being steadfast, even when it goes unseen. And Lucas, somewhere far from the lake, in a room of his own making, would come to understand, in time, the weight of what he had taken for granted. Not the gifts, not the wealth, not the privileges, but the rare, enduring force of a parent's love, the kind that bends without breaking, that persists without expectation, that chooses mercy even when none is deserved. The lingering thought remains, soft and haunting. If someone gives you everything, and you feel nothing, what exactly are you missing? It is not wealth. It is not comfort. It is not the easy path laid before you. It is the recognition of something deeper, something unseen yet unshakable, the quiet, patient, and unwavering measure of love, the kind that endures, waits, and forgives long after all else has passed. In the end, the house stands, the lake reflects, and the world continues. The story does not shout, it does not scream. It whispers in the small hours of the night, in the quiet after a listener has closed their eyes. A story of giving, of taking, of enduring, and of mercy, the kind that is felt long after the final word is spoken. And in that whisper, the listener carries the haunting question, folded softly into their thoughts as they drift toward sleep. If you have everything and still feel nothing, can even the greatest mercy reach you? Some gifts are measured in wealth, others in love. And some, the rarest of all, are measured in mercy. Lucas Blakemore had everything, and yet he was missing something no amount of money could ever buy. As you lay down tonight, think quietly. If someone gives you everything and you feel nothing, what exactly are you missing? And could mercy ever reach you there?